can all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all here. Anyone here for the first time tonight? Those of you here for the first time, what brings you here? So you got dragged along. I'm just kidding. Yeah. They've been dragged to worse places, so it's all right. But I'm glad you're here. I didn't mean that to sound how it sounded, but maybe I did. I don't know. What else? First time here, a couple hands in the back. What brings you here? Now that you know you're getting called on, the hands just go down. Who else is here for the first time? Go ahead. What brings you here? To learn. About what? Sorry?
Just to learn and keep continue down.
Nice. What path do you think it's going on?
I guess that's what I'm trying to figure
You want to find out? All right. So I got an hour to help you figure out if you're on the right path or not. I will do my best. Glad you're here. Welcome. Yeah.
Just searching for a spiritual community of some kind.
Yeah. Nice. Welcome.
My lovely friends come, so I wanted to come.
Yes. What'd they tell you to get you here?
All kinds of lies and
Perfect. Perfect. I kind of tell them to do that. It's the only way it works.
beautiful.
Promise you pizza, all kinds of stuff after.
Yeah.
If they didn't promise you pizza, they before, right? Did you really get pizza earlier?
No.
So I was going to give you a hard time for not bringing me any, but yeah, I'm glad you're here. Yeah, it's always interesting to me. I like to throw that question out, once every couple of weeks. Often I'll also ask for all of you who keep coming back for some crazy reason, time in and time out, time and time again, like just to remind yourselves like why you keep showing up to this stuff. If you're brand new, to kind of explore, like, even the question of to see if this path, right? But there's so much more behind the question of, is this the right path? What that means is you've been on some sort of path like we all have. And the question is the path we're on healthy for us? Right? This place is irrelevant, right? The question is the path that you're on currently, is how you're living your life currently, physically, mentally, emotionally, is that path healthy for you? Because, you're only here an hour a week, some of you maybe 2 or 3 hours a week, but the real questions are, what are you doing outside of here? That's really the journey. And so if you're brand new, to explore, what is my life like? What is my life like outside of this stuff? And if I'm happy and peaceful and content, then great. If not, then any sort of spiritual journey is really an opportunity, not so much to learn about the spiritual journey, but to learn about yourself and to explore yourself. Explore why you're unhappy, why you're sad, why you're angry, why you're depressed, why you're stressed, why you're anxious, to explore those things. And if you've been at this for a long time, to continue to ask yourself why you're still at this, and also to look back and reflect on what led you to this path to begin with. For me, that's always been a really important, I think, just kind of reminder to reflect on that moment that you started any sort of journey. What led you to that? Because on any spiritual journey, you could be years into it. You're going to have moments where you think, this doesn't work, or, oh, it's not working for me. And I'm not even talking about Buddhism or Dharma Bum Temple, just wherever. But you'll have moments where you start to question things, no matter how smooth your journey is going. And then it's an opportunity to come back to what led me to this in the first place. Because very often we need that reminder, so we don't lose that inspiration to continue to cultivate and to practice. So with that being said, and to those joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're here. Feel free to say hello. There's a chat box on your screen somewhere. Feel free to say hi. When we get to questions, you can put them there. So we'll start with the meditation practice. A couple things to tell you before we begin, especially for those who are new. Nothing's going to happen to you, right? You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit and breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos, and this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture. You want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third. If you're on a bench or chair, just trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders. Hands can be on the knees or lap, whatever's comfortable. Most important, especially if you're new, you're not trying to shut your mind off. It's not going to go blank. You're not going to think nothing. Your mind will continue to race. I will say things periodically to remind you that you're lost in thought and bring you back to present moment, or to wake you up because you have fallen asleep. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed, whatever's comfortable. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths slowly. And eventually settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, feel them fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, wanting nothing but to sit and breathe. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments from your practice, just sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do, nowhere else to go, and no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It has nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external situation. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than any one of us who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply for all of us, regardless where you come from or what you believe in and where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond every other 20-minute period of your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. Imagine going a day without being disturbed by someone. Imagine going an hour without being disturbed by someone. This practice is not easy. It is not necessarily fun. It is not an escape, as often people think it is. If your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, meditation isn't going to fix that. It helps you become aware of your life that's a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess so you can make changes in your life. This practice is direct perception into the present moment. And present moment is filled with conflict, chaos, difficulty, challenges. That's what we all get every single day of our lives. The world has always been a mess. The world will always, sadly, probably be a mess. But the question is, are you a mess? And that's what this practice is. This practice isn't about changing, fixing, controlling others. This isn't about getting other people to do everything you want them to. This isn't about telling everyone how the world should be. This practice is like holding up a mirror and looking back at your thoughts, your words, and your actions. And understanding that your thoughts and your words and your actions impact your mental and emotional health and well-being. The Buddha called this karma. Karma is not what goes around, comes around. Karma is not people getting what they deserve or they did something bad, so you hope they get bad. That's not karma. Karma is not what we get, it's what we give. Karma literally means action. It's what we bring into the world. And the Buddha taught very clearly we generate karma 3 ways: body, speech, mind. Thoughts, words, actions. So this entire practice, what the Buddha taught for 45 years before he died, was to be mindful of everything you think, everything you say, and everything you do. Because that creates your reality. That's all this practice is. And looking at the intention, ultimately behind every thought, the intention behind every word, and the intention behind every action. And are those thoughts and words and actions coming from a place of loving kindness and compassion? Or are they coming from a place of anger and hatred? That's it. They say the Buddha taught the same thing 84,000 different ways for 45 years until he died. And for me, it boils down to very simply the basic fundamental teachings of awareness of body, speech, mind, thoughts, words, actions. And that is hard enough. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, and becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do in each moment. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everybody outside of us, and we work on changing our mind and our reaction to everybody outside of us, your life gets a little simpler. This is not about ignoring what goes on in the world and pretending that there aren't horrific things happening. There are. But it's so much easier to point fingers and blame everybody else, as if we have never been cruel to anyone in our lives. This practice is fighting to create change, engaging in community. But as you engage in community to create change that you want to see, are you trying to do that from a place of loving kindness and compassion? Or are you doing it from a place of anger and hatred and judgment? And when you try to create change, to create a kinder, gentler world, are you doing it because you think you're better than everybody else? Are you doing it because you think you're right? Or is it coming from a place of non-self, as the Buddha taught, to my understanding, where you're simply doing it to create a kinder, gentler world? Not because you think your views are better than anyone else's. Anyone in here think their views are right? One. That's why you're always in the front row. You know? One honest dude in the whole room, you know? Most of us roam around all day long thinking our views are right. And then we defend them and we tell everybody how right we are. And there is all conflict and chaos in the world. But with that, I'll pause. For me, always just prefer to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And we use the rest of our brief time this evening for questions. And to those who are joining virtually, welcome again. Glad you're here. Feel free, if you have any questions, put them in the chat box. I'll do my best to respond. And we'll open up to questions. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
My name is James, and just about self-doubt.
Ah.
And I have an audition coming up, and I notice a lot of self-doubt in myself. And curious, like, Buddhist perspective on self-doubt. Is that just, I've heard like self-pity is pride in reverse, feeling sorry for yourself. So I was just curious.
Sounds like lots of Western psychological therapy stuff.
Yeah, that's my feel.
Yeah. So the question for those in here virtually or anyone in the room, your question is around self-doubt. You have an audition coming up, self-doubt. What's kind of Buddhist take on that? You said something about, self-pity is something in reverse, self. I heard a lot of self. Here's the thing about Buddhist teachings. Makes it real simple. There is no self. So whatever your therapist, psychologist, Google search has told you, all of that, I would ignore it unless it's helping you. If it's helping you, then stick with it. Buddha taught very simply, there is no self. What that means is, in my self's way of trying to, James, right? Is that what you said? Myself, Jeff, trying to explain it to yourself, James, what non-self is. Perfect example in perfect thing to use in your example of an audition coming up. Your audition is coming up, so that means it's happened already? No. When is it? October 12th. So it's like a million seconds away. Do you know how many millions of things are going to happen between today and October 12th? Like, seriously, I might not be alive. You might not be alive. Whatever you're auditioning for might not be around anymore, right? You have no idea what's even going to happen the rest of the 30 minutes we're in this room. Yet all of a sudden you have some idea. Forget about whether it's a good idea or a bad idea for a moment. We'll get to that in a minute. But you have some idea of what's going to happen October 12th. You don't even know what's going to happen in the next 23 minutes, right? Why do you think you have some idea what's going to happen on October 12th? I wish you could all see the look on his face, right? You don't. You have no idea what's going to happen on October 12th. Here's the other crazy thing, right? Whatever's going to happen on October 12th could potentially work out 1,000,000 times better than you're thinking it may. But that's also not the point. The point is you don't know what's going to happen. But what you do, or what you are sticking to, is this attachment to self that is telling James stories from your whole life that tell yourself, I'm not good enough, I'm not this enough, what if this doesn't? Nonsense. All those stories. You ever done good in your life?
Yes.
Yes. Good answer. You ever done bad in your life?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, right? Why is that one always more than just good? Yeah. Absolutely, I've done bad. I did a couple good things 27 years ago, right? We've all done good. We've all done bad. We've all had things go well. We've all had things go terrible. Your entire life is going to be that way. Years ago, one of the college kids asked a question up at State. He said, I'm afraid that when I speak, people are judging me. And I said, you don't need to be afraid of that. They are judging you. Every single one of them. Every one of you in the room right now is judging me. You asked that question, so not everybody is judging you. You were brave enough to even raise your hand and ask a question. Do you really care what these people think about you in asking that question?
Maybe a little.
Right. Yeah, maybe a little. Why? You don't even know who they are. I know a lot of these people. It doesn't matter what they think about you. It doesn't matter. The reality is we are so afraid of what people think about us because we have a story about ourselves. And this story about ourselves is usually not a good one. And we tell ourselves a story, attachment to self. Jeff, I'm not this enough. I'm not that enough. I did this wrong. I did that wrong. I hurt this person. I hurt that person. And then I tell myself a story my whole life that says what a miserable you-know-what I am. And then I'm angry, and then I'm depressed. And then 25 years ago, I find Buddhism. Right? And I realized that all of that was just some ridiculous story that sunk me into a deeper level of anger and depression about some nonsense I was telling myself about myself. I'm just 1 trillion experiences over 1 trillion years. That in this moment, I'm just sitting here. Whatever I've done is done. I've done a lot of harm. I've done a lot of good. In the future, whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to do. Hopefully I'll do less harm, and hopefully I'll do more good. But all I am right now is just some whatever talking to whatever. That's it. Drop the story. The self is a story that you tell yourself about yourself. You're going to have an experience on October 12th. And you're going to go in there and you're going to do this thing called an audition. And maybe it'll go phenomenal. And you'll get whatever you're auditioning for. And maybe it'll turn out an absolute disaster and flop completely and miserable. And you won't get what you're auditioning for. And you know what? Either way, you're probably going to be okay. But the story, you will torture yourself for the next, what is today? I don't know, like 12 days before it even happens. You know how much miserable stuff could happen between now and October 12th, and yet you're worried about the 12th? I would worry about everything else. And just hope you hope you get to the 12th. And this is where the practice, I'm joking, but being very serious. I'm just trying to give you some abstract ways to look at it. Right? We put these moments in our lives, these markers in our lives, as if they define us. You're going to do 1,000,000 things between now and the 12th that, if you use that mindset, that define who you are and what you do. You're just going to do things in life. When you do things in life, enjoy them. Smile, be happy, give it your best, come in with pure intention, and let the chips fall as they may. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it just grips so hard to the self-attachment.
Of course.
It's annoying.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And believe me, the heart of Buddha's awakening is overcoming the attachment to self. So it's not like in 25 minutes I can be like, all right, James, look, this is all you need to know. Read page 7 and you will remove yourself from the attachment of self. It's not an overnight quick fix. It's not something you're going to conquer before October 12th. But it's something that you can become aware of. That's why I say this is a practice, day in and day out, recognizing how attached we are to that story. You have ever anyone in your life that you're angry at from like 20 years ago?
Mostly just myself.
Okay, well, that's easy, right? But if that self doesn't exist in the way you think it exists, then who are you even angry at? And who is it that's even angry at whoever that was?
I want to, be somebody else, basically.
Yeah, but you're not anyone. You're just an experience. You are a physical form body with consciousness in you that people called your parents or whoever gave you a name. Is that name you? Is your name you?
I haven't got that far yet.
Well, that's actually where that's where you start. To identify with your name. So is every James you? There's a lot of Jameses out there. So there's a lot of yous out there. I don't understand how that works. So you are not your name. Are you what you had for breakfast today?
No.
Are you what you did last week?
Maybe.
No, work with me, huh? No. Those are experiences that you had. Experiences that you went through that created this moment. That's it. Again, easier said than done, I get it. But that's what the practice is. And that's where meditation comes into play, where in meditation, we're working on abiding in cessation of breath. And that we are just this form body with sensation of breath. That's all. Good luck on the 12th. What else? Yeah.
What is the Buddhist belief about eternal life or what happens after physical death?
Man, you guys are making this real easy. Buddhist belief on eternal life or what happens after we die, right? That's the question? Yeah, okay. So a couple things. First and foremost, to understand, to put into context for those who might be brand new to Buddhism, the Buddha was not a god, right? He was just some dude. Lived 500 years before Christ, 2,500 years ago, right? And that's it. He was asked 12 or 14 questions he wouldn't respond to. And one of them was, should we believe in gods and goddesses, right? He was raised, in essence, Hindu. And so at that time, there were lots of gods and goddesses to believe in. And so what they were asking him was, should we believe in these gods and goddesses as he was teaching? And he said, I'm just a dude. He probably didn't say dude, but I'm just a guy. I'm not a god. What you believe in is up to you. If you believe in gods and goddesses, you do. If you don't, you don't. I'm simply teaching you how to live a kind and gentle, peaceful life. That was what he wanted to understand. He wanted people to understand. It's also, before I even get to your question, important to put into context, especially since your question very seriously is, what did the Buddha believe about or what did he teach about? At the time of the Buddha, 2,500 years ago, again, 500 years before Christ, if you went up to somebody at that time and said you have one life and then you're going to heaven or hell, they would have thought you were crazy, right? They all believed in rebirth or reincarnation or continuation of consciousness, whatever language you want to use around this. So the Buddha was teaching to a group of people, to an audience of people that all believed in a continuation. Drastically different from what the average Western person thinks today. You go up to people today and say you're going to be reborn. And they're like, huh? But it was the exact opposite back then. So this idea of what happens when you die was very simple. Your consciousness will be reborn. That's what they taught. But it wasn't like he invented it. It wasn't like the Buddha, again, it wasn't like the Buddha was God and said, this is what's going to happen to you. What was taught at the time very simply, was that we have what's called a laya vijnana, storehouse consciousness, right? This kind of goes back to the non-self part. There's this consciousness, right? Stream of thought, think of it that way. Essence, I hear people say, whatever you want to call it, that when the body is formed, right? You have sperm, you have egg, you have conception, boom, body comes together. Consciousness enters the body. And that is where what we call life begins. When the physical body, the shell, dies, the consciousness leaves the body, right? Tibetan Buddhism, Tibetan Book of the Dead. Tibetan Buddhism is really great for looking at reincarnation. They teach a lot of detail around it. I think it's the easiest to understand. I've never studied Tibetan Buddhism at depth, but if you're interested in this process, look at Tibetan Buddhism. but they call it the Bardo stage, that when the consciousness leaves the body, it stays in the Bardo stage for 49 days. And at some point during those 49 days, on the 7th day of a 49th day, that consciousness will re-enter when the physical form has come together. I saw a kind of a metaphor example years ago. Imagine you're holding a teacup, shatter the cup, right? And there's tea on your hand, it's on your leg, it's on the floor. Take a rag, wipe up the tea, rinse it out. So the tea all over, right? Wherever it touches, but the shell, the cup is gone. So that's the consciousness. So the Buddha wasn't addressing like the heaven hell stuff like we would look at today.
I'm not talking about heaven and hell. Specifically, I had a more than a near-death experience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was no way I was gonna, anyways. And so I
Actually, some way, because here you are.
Well, yeah, no, I'm here, but I had this experience of my consciousness going, somewhere else.
Yeah.
And this thing stuck in my head. Did I actually have a physical death? And this thing knew what I'd flown to?
Right.
And I can't move past that.
Yeah.
So
I would read a lot of Tibetan Buddhism. It will help you identify that stuff. Seriously. Yeah. And I know I rambled into the heaven or hell thing. I actually didn't think you mentioned that. Usually when people ask questions, after about 2 minutes in, I'm still looking at them, but I'm no longer even responding to their question. I'm just rambling for everybody's sake. So when I said heaven or hell, I wasn't even referring to you meaning that. But definitely what you just described, I would look heavily into Tibetan Buddhism and the reincarnation process, because that's similar to what I've read and seen along those lines. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Along that vein, the Buddha was onto something. He cruised around and got enlightened and then taught people and then ascended. And how do you make sure that you don't come back? That this is your last week?
Do you guys group together and plan these questions out? All right, so let me paraphrase that for those at home who didn't hear that. So the Buddha, I loved how you started. The Buddha cruised around, he awakened, and then he ascended. And your question is, how do we make sure we don't come back? Yeah.
Yeah, just a softball.
So, I mean, the thing is, the funny thing is, and those of you who've been around long enough, these nights really crack me up because it really is you all who drive the night. Wherever the questions go, it's what I respond to. And the thing is with these questions, these are very textbook, fundamental Buddhist teachings, very core fundamental Buddhist teachings around these things. The ones around how do I deal with so-and-so who left me, or, this death or this trauma, those are the things that are really tough. This stuff is pretty cut and dry. It really is. It doesn't mean it's easy to do, right? But your question is, how do we, in Buddhist terms, they call it, when the Buddha died, they call it parinirvana. So nirvana means to extinguish. That when he died, so he awakened at 35 years old, he taught for 45, he died at 80, and he entered into, again, what they call parinirvana, which means nirvana without remainder, meaning there was no more rebirth. And so going back to even my earlier comment, a lot of people come into Buddhism often think that and I get it, we all want to be happy. Nobody came here for the most part to make sure they had a good rebirth, right? People are here because they're stressed or anxious or angry. They're interested in meditation, whatever. But most people don't show up to a place like this because they want to make sure they have a good rebirth. But what the Buddha was teaching was actually how to make sure we didn't suffer. And according to the Buddha, at the time of the Buddha, there was only one way to absolutely 100% guarantee we did not suffer. And that was what? Not be reborn. Because he said, as soon as we're born, we're going to experience suffering. So what he was teaching was not how all us lay people could get all the stuff we want in life and be happy. What he was teaching was to free ourselves from samsara, the cycle of birth and death. And it's called the 12 links of dependent origination. So all you'd have to do is go home and Google 12 links of dependent origination. And there are 12 steps, right? And any one of those, when you free yourself from that link, you'll stop yourself from being reborn. Pretty simple. It's just one thing you got to do. But ultimately, coming back to the very first teaching, the Four Noble Truths, they also say that the Buddha was able to neutralize karma, meaning he wasn't generating any sort of positive or negative karma, for lack of better words. That all of his intention was beyond this sense of self and ego and attachment to self, right? He didn't just cease to exist. He's still engaged in the world. But the greed, the anger, the ignorance, it wasn't there. It was all generosity. It was all compassion. It was all wisdom. The craving, desire wasn't there. It was all non-attachment. It was all understanding the impermanent nature of all phenomena. So to free yourself from the cycle of rebirth is what the practice ultimately is about. And again, I say that because most Western people don't come to Buddhism because they want to make sure they're not reborn, because it's not what in this culture we're taught. So people come to Buddhism not thinking about next life. They come to Buddhism thinking, I'm a mess. I want to be happy. You know, whatever that mess means to you. So 12 links of dependent origination. Yeah. What else? Yeah.
Can you elaborate on boundaries in Buddhism? So, for example, if we are to work on our karma and do good in the world, right? Does Buddhism teach boundaries?
When you say boundaries, expand on that a little bit so I understand where you're going.
So,
Without too much detail. Yeah. Sorry.
yeah, I guess where I'm coming from is, there is a limit on how much you can give without hurting your own self. And I know we just talked about self.
Sure.
We're supposed to kind of step back and not.
I got it.
Self, so.
Yeah, no, that helps. Thank you. So the question was, in Buddhist teachings, where do boundaries come into play? And specifically with regards to, there's a limit of making sure we don't harm ourselves. So my first teacher, Venerable Master Xing Yung, 2005, monastery life, somebody asked him, Master, do you ever feel that people take advantage of you? And he looked back at the person who asked the question and he smiled and he said, yes, all the time. We're not there. So ultimately, yes, there is no self to be taken advantage of. But we're still attached to ourselves. We still cling to ourselves. We still have these ideas that we need, this safety that we need, this comfort that we need, these emotions that we need met. Like we're still, pretty needy creatures for the most part. I mean, no offense to any enlightened people in the room, but most of us who come into this practice really do have a lot of stuff emotionally and mentally that we feel we need. And if that's not met, we're not cool with it. That makes sense so far? And so to me, your question really is around at what point do we allow people to kind of push those boundaries down? And at what point do we push back? And there's a Zen Master Dogen, one of my favorite quotes from him is, you must get to know the self before you can get rid of the self. So yes, while we're talking about non-self, it's incredibly important to understand that none of us in this room abide in the place of non-self. We are all wrapped up in ourselves. And so as I always say, for me, the practice isn't about abiding in non-self tomorrow. It's about recognizing how much of myself am I stuck in and realizing where that's at from moment to moment. To your question, there's also nothing in Buddhism that says we should be a doormat, so to speak, and let people just walk all over us. I always put an asterisk here, from physical, mental, emotional abuse. If you are in toxic, unhealthy dynamics, relationships, sometimes a family, you're stuck maybe and you can't remove yourself from it. Sometimes you can. But very often in our lives, we have relationships, whether it's romantic relationships, work relationships, that we can potentially remove ourselves from. There's no Buddhist practice that says stay there and be abused. Toxic, unhealthy, unsafe situations, remove yourself from that. Then, does that make sense so far? Then there's a situation where we get to ask ourselves, how much of this can I handle? And if it has become so debilitating that I have nothing to stand on anymore, and it's clearly unhealthy and unsafe and toxic for you, then that's too much. You're not being a bad Buddhist because you protect yourself. Does that make sense? And that is very important, because that message can get lost in this talk about non-self, because non-self makes it sound as if we don't exist. We exist. We just exist completely differently from how we perceive ourselves to exist. We are here, but we are here completely differently from how we are here. That person that is afraid, to go back to James, and the person that's afraid, you didn't say afraid, I'm saying you're afraid. The person that's afraid of the audition coming up, the only reason that fear is there is because there's been potential failure for things in the past, or worried about things that might go wrong in the future. If we haven't had any of those experiences, then we embrace and practice what's called beginner's mind. And we practice each moment, we go into each audition, we go into each conversation, we go into each relationship as if we've never been there before. And then we enter it with just this wide-eyed excitement, unless it's unhealthy and unsafe. And then we remove ourselves from it. So that self that is putting up that boundary is putting up that boundary out of past fears. But again, those past fears can also keep you safe. We all know we shouldn't, run across the street in traffic. We've learned that. We've been taught that. Simple. So we learn from past experiences, but we don't need to stay stuck there. Does that help? I try. I don't have all the answers. I'm just some dude making stuff up. What else? Yeah.
This is my first time here. And
Nice.
This is a real beginner type question.
That's good.
Hopefully it can be useful.
Yeah.
Is there a purpose or benefit to this detachment of self?
Yeah. Yes. So the question is, again, virtually, for those who didn't hear it, so I repeat the questions. You said it's your first time here. Hopefully the question is beneficial. All questions are beneficial, first of all. Welcome as a first-time person. And your question was, to paraphrase, is you said, is there a purpose to the detachment of the self, right? So glad you said it that way, because it allows me to re-emphasize or to state the practice of non-attachment is not detach. It's not cut. So the word, often people say detached. It's non-attachment. Detached sounds almost like a cutting off or a severing or a separation. Detached sounds almost like we don't care. Where non-attachment is actually the opposite of that. Non-attachment is absolute love, but without manipulation, without control. Do you have anyone in your life you love and care about? Of course. Have they ever done things that you don't like?
True.
Of course. And did you get angry? Did you get angry because it hurt you? Yeah. Well, were their actions about you, or were they about them? Which one?
They were not targeted.
Right. It wasn't targeted towards you. They were just projecting, reflecting their pain, their suffering, their experiences to you. And then you felt that pain, right? I mean, I'm just rambling here. But so you're asking about the purpose in non-attachment. It's understanding that everybody's experienced some degree of pain, suffering, stress, angst, discomfort. And so when we do things that harm others, we are coming from a place of pain and suffering very often. That's what led to that. So when other people do things, non-attachment means I love them regardless of who and how they are. Now, in, say, intimate romantic relationships, that doesn't necessarily mean, even back to the earlier question about boundaries, that doesn't mean you have to stay there. You could non-attach and love someone and still just get out, right? But certain situations you can't. Non-attachment is to love and care about them, but without trying to fix them or control them or want them to be different from how they are. Anyone in your life you wish did things differently?
Myself.
Yeah, mainly ourselves, right? So it applies to the non-attachment applies to ourselves first and foremost, because this idea of not attaching to the story about ourselves is to say to ourselves, hey, I'm doing my best, and not be so hard on ourselves. But for some reason, we have so many lofty expectations about ourselves, often even most of the time for many, greater than the expectation we put on others. But non-attachment is love. And so the benefit is, in addition to what I just said, it allows us to embrace conflict in personal relationships or even with those we don't know, and try to have a sense of understanding, a sense of forgiveness, a sense of compassion, create dialogue. Thich Nhat Hanh, the great late Vietnamese, scholar, Zen priest, monk, activist, he said nirvana, back to the other question, is freedom from views. And he said that the greatest attachment we have is to that sense of self. And that we think our views are what?
Correct.
Right. So non-attachment allows us to listen and engage. Yeah. So,
Thank you.
yeah, for sure. Anything else before we close?
What you gonna throw on the radio when you're driving home?
Say again?
What you gonna listen to whenever you're driving?
The craziness in my own head. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or highlights from the Cubs game today, because I'm a Cubs fan. So we'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. All right, a few quick announcements from our Dharma Bum host, Eddie, before you all head out. Thanks, Eddie.
Hello, everyone. I'm tonight's host, Eddie. We opened Dharma Bum Temple 18 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and they're not looking for students. They're simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone with addiction, and our food redistribution program is every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and also posted in the entryway above the shoe rack. We have a lending library. If you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it and then bring it back whenever you are done with it. Please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out. If a few people could stay to close and latch the windows, that would be helpful. Thank you for being here. We wish you well. Hope to see you all again.
Thanks, Ed.